Magic the Gathering has a 4-color combination problem, evident in the fact that it's the most sparsely populated set of color combinations in the game, even falling behind 5-colored cards, with the number of cards counting 4 colors of mana just barely cracking the double digits, even though this combination was introduced all the way back in the set Guild Pact 17 years ago with the Nephilim creature type. This is why I feel we need to discuss the issues inherent to these combinations, ones that the designers of this game are fully aware of, but cannot be overcome without first bringing them to light. So in this video, I want to tackle why, from a design and identity standpoint, this combination of colors is bound to fail. But before we start this discussion, I would just like to give a special thanks to my newest patron, Alderell. With that, let us begin with the problem closest to my heart, and the one I have the most trouble overcoming. One of the most robust aspects of the color pie is its ability to take 5 unique identities in its 5 core colors and make something entirely new by simply merging colors together into new combinations. This facet of the color pie allows the designers to craft wholly interesting and unique characters and factions by using these varying degrees of combined colors. But I would argue this part of design has limitations, as it can be stretched like a rubber band by adding colors, but will eventually break. For instance, the identity of white is very distinct in contrast to each other member of the color pie, but in the adding of red to form Boros, a similar yet unique entity is crafted, with its own belief systems and motivations. If we push it a step further, or stretch the rubber band, Boros is then similar yet entirely separate from Naya, though the differences slowly become more subtle, as the only difference here is 1/3 of its identity, green. So now I want you to imagine a Dune color combination faction. Would adding in black to Naya not create another new potential philosophy to base it off of? The truth is that yes, but at this point our rubber band is reaching its breaking point. Now the only thing separating it from Naya is 1/4 of its identity. Sure, something new has been created here, but is it even remotely as unique as the initial color of white? No, for you see, as each color is added, its sharp lines that divide it from the other colors or combinations begin to blur with one another. No longer is it a single color defined by its stark contrast to 4 others. It is instead an amalgamation of far too many features. Each 1/4 of a color within the combination is now vying for its spot to shine. It's like adding color after color when painting. Eventually, all you get is mud, instead of a crimson red or a majestic purple. Furthermore, if we look to compare any of the 4-colored combinations against one another, the only difference that can be gleaned is from the single color that is missing from each. Is that really refined enough then to separate any 2 of them from each other in a meaningful way? I would say once again, no. I believe that the color pie is at its strongest with 1 or 2 colors, because the difference between its rivals are vast and refined. Ask yourself why it is, let's say, Dimir is so different from Rakdos. Both of them share a color, and yet hold a wholly different identity, even at a glance. The reason is that they share only 1 color, or half of their identity. This means that the other half plays a vital role in separating the 2 from one another, as the differences between red and blue are vast. If we do the same experiment with Witch and Yor, the difference still lies in a single color, but that single color is but a small fraction of each combination. Thus, the difference between the 2 is not sharply defined. Why is this important though? Well, within media, it's vital to have strong identities for characters or factions. These strong archetypes allow us to understand a character in a single moment. So when we're using most of the color pie to define them, there isn't enough there to tell these characters apart in a meaningful way at a glance. This is why even 3 color combinations can be a challenge, and why we mostly only see mono or dual colored characters and factions within the story of this game. With wedge and shard-based planes being such an exception, they're an event in themselves. When it comes to Magic the Gathering, most people's interactions with the story and its characters are only through the cards and some passing trailers. As such, it's important to have rigid and easily identifiable characters and factions. Any player with even the most passing understanding of the color pie knows what makes a blue character what they are, can intuit what the identity of a Gruul faction is, and for those with better knowledge of the pie, can figure out the identity of Abzan. But even if I put a witch combination card in front of those that have a robust understanding of the color pie, even they would have to debate its philosophy, as with its vast usage of each color, it becomes nearly impossible to decipher at a glance what makes it its own entity. Need archetypes are important when consuming media in a game like this, and as such, it's vital to set stark contrasts between characters by allotting them strong identities, and that's why Magic is at its best when it comes to mono or dual colored characters and factions. Storytelling and world building are some of the most interesting aspects of this game, but are only one facet of Magic the Gathering, and even they have to bend to the game they find themselves within, as it is a game first and foremost. Because of this, it's important we discuss why 4-color doesn't work from a mechanical or design standpoint. Now, I don't want to claim to be some expert in designing games, but in doing this work and holding this hobby as long as I have, there are some insights that I believe can explain the lack of 4-colored cards in this game. A challenge harder to overcome than identity. Up front, the obvious answer is in the mechanical color pie. When you have a card that has access to nearly every color, what then is its mechanical identity? Your card, for instance, would have access to white's board wipes, blue's draw spells, black's single target removal, and red's direct damage. How then do the designers find a fair and interesting middle ground? One that does not lead to a homogenization of the game's most efficient spells. This is why 4-colored cards lack any true mechanical identity, as all they can really do is pull from 2 to 3 of these colors to create a given card, in fear of just turning it into keyword soup. A perfect example of keyword soup is Aragorn the Uniter, who takes simple mechanics from each of its colors and pushes them all onto one card. Such cards are uninspired and dull. When designing a mechanic for a combination, it's not just about which mechanics it has access to based on each individual color within it, but rather creating mechanics that work in the context of the combination itself. When it comes to 2-colored combinations, the lines are drawn in a way that is rigid, which you may think stifles creativity and yet is the opposite. These definitions are so rigid that instead of asking yourself what does white and black bring to the table, you ask yourself what would be an Orzhov mechanic instead. 4-colored combinations do not hold such luxuries, as their definitions are so loose that there is no solid identity to lean onto. Another example of this lack of mechanical identity is the card Atraxia Praetor's Voice. There is nothing there to lean onto to craft a mechanic that is wholly its own based on the colors present, as there is so much at play within its identity. So once again, the designers fell onto keyword soup, and honestly I don't blame them for it because this is a challenge hard to overcome. But let's say we can get past this and assume that sure, this problem isn't so bad. What is the next logical step? Could there ever exist a set based around 4-colored factions? Well, the short answer is no, while the long answer is based in the structural needs of designing an entire set around factions. The issue comes in 2 forms. The first is mana, and the other is the limited format. If the designers decided to create a set based around 4 colors, it would require the mana to play these spells, As such, an obtuse amount of mana fixing would be required. It would then be a set that demanded multiple shard and wedge lands or Nephilim lands, all accompanied by an array of fetch lands, all in the same set. And even with such mana fixing in place, bricking would still be a major problem. This then feeds into the limited format, which would be honestly unplayable in a set like this, as it would be less about what spells you drafted and more about the lands you had access to, an insurmountable hurdle that I doubt could be overcome without doing lasting damage to the limited, standard, and even eternal formats. Like I said, I'm no designer or top-level player, but even to me as an observer, the problems are apparent. Does all of this mean that 4-colored cards can never work? That we should stop thinking about them, or that the designers should just give up on the idea? I would say no. There are instances of it working already, and it can apply in very specific situations. That said, I don't think we will ever see 4-colored factions for both flavor and gameplay reasons, but there are some characters or creatures where this does make sense. A good example of such is Omnath, Locus of Creation, a character who is made up of all colors except black. In a way, that plays into its identity quite well. Or in the Nephilim themselves, who gave the combinations their namesake, as they are grotesque amalgamations of mana, with effects that are interesting even if they don't exactly play into each color present within them. There's also something that I always talk about when discussing the color pie and a person's personality or philosophies, and that is the fact that we as humans are complex beings. What this means is that we are not going to ever be mono or dual colored. No, that is saved for works of fiction, where archetypal dependence is important. Instead, I would argue we are degrees of 4 to 5 colors. This does mean that there is a greater conversation to be had when it comes to these combinations, one I will tackle in the future. But personally, I don't think we'll ever see these combinations widely implemented in the game, and for me, that's a good thing. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my rant on 4-colored combinations in Magic. But hey, this was only a start to the discussion, and only my perspective. So please leave your comments down below. Do you agree with what I said, or do you think I'm missing something vital here? Let's chat about it. And with that, friends, I will catch you in the multiverse. Bye.